just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
I was kind of partially hoping to come in here screaming with some stuff to yell about, but that's not the case. The committee got it right. I tweeted this out, and this isn't like a shocking take or like a shocking revelation. Surprisingly, the committee did it right, which is something that we're so used to on a yearly basis. And then also anyone who watches my ranking quick reaction shows, those 2-minute shows that I've done the whole season, I've always had something that's made me upset. And there's always something that they have clearly and blatantly fucked up. But they got it right. The 4 teams as it stand in the playoff right now are Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State at 4 in that order. Alabama 5, Tennessee at 6. When I say that they got it right, they didn't do anything egregious that is going to make us upset and angry here. And the main thing we're talking about, I think that those remaining 3 of those teams made sense. 3 of those teams, there was a lot of an argument to be made for why that they deserve to be in it. But where the fuck up could have happened is with TCU, is placing Alabama in ahead of TCU. And I know Nick Saban was on his press tour lobbying for Alabama to get in, but albeit his argument was that we had close losses against good teams and we're playing in the SEC, TCU is more deserving of it. They shouldn't be held accountable for an overtime close loss in their conference championship game.
To a very
this
good
isn't the
team.
situation with, yes.
I was also
like
telling
USC
him, he's a huge SEC guy. I'm like, hey, dude, Kansas State would beat Ole Miss. All right, we got to be realistic about the situation here in the Big 12. There's 2 teams that can actually play ball. It was the 2 teams that were playing in the Big 12 championship yesterday. So all of this SEC was so tough this year. They weren't. And that's a take that changes. It's a take that changes. And it can change, and it should be able to change. In week 8 or 9, I said that maybe the SEC should have 3 teams in the college football playoff. I was saying that openly because maybe they should have. But look at this now. I understand why you think they got it right. It's because a team did lose on Friday, and I think you were rather happy about it.
I was very happy that USC
regardless, I lost a lot of money. I really
good.
Everybody.
I also bet on USC, by the way. I don't know. I don't even remember doing. I think it was in like a fever state when I was sick, and I dropped a -3 bet, and I was so mad when I found out that I made that bet. But continue your point,
dude. Everybody I knew had money on USC because of course, right? And that was an embarrassment. I understand that there might have been a little bit of they did it so right because USC didn't even really have a chance, but they played themselves out of having a chance. And whether or not that should be allowed or rational, it's kind of above our pay grade to say. It is becoming a much more popular take, though. It is becoming a much more popular take that teams that shouldn't be rewarded for not having to play in the conference championship games. Again, flip side of the coin, you're there, win the game. So I can get both sides of it. People are really hostile about it, and they're really hostile about their side of that coin, but in 2 years it won't really matter that much. So we'll
I know that that's the most aggravating thing about all this. I am a supporter of the 12-team playoff, but I am so aggravated by the fact that we're sitting here and we're kind of talking about like the semantics of what goes into a team that earns a playoff spot and all that shit. But it's not going to matter when the playoff expands. Like, we've got one more year of this. And this year is the perfect year of support for the 12-team playoff because there are so many different angles that we could have taken. And I know I was talking to Blake.
Teams.
Yeah. I was talking to Blake about this yesterday, that there's obviously going to be arguments like, oh, why the hell would Tulane get in over LSU? That's a separate issue, but I'd rather have those debates for a lower down seed. The main point here is that we've got more good football teams. We're not removing other teams that suffered close losses. We're not removing those teams. So we have a much larger competitive field. Regardless, this is the grouping that we have. But Sean, I got a little bit of a spicy take that I want to throw out there.
All right, spice it up then.
I actually think I'm fine with the playoff field. I actually think I would have rather had Alabama in at 4 than Ohio State.
No, you're tripping.
Hear me out. I think that Alabama would have provided a more competitive matchup for Georgia. I don't have a ton of faith for Ohio State against Georgia in this
It's
game.
not about the matchups. It's about the best
but-
team.
But on top of that, who is Ohio State beaten? Their best win is against Penn State, and the rest of their wins are against mid-tier Big Ten teams. At the same time, Alabama, their losses come to 2 ranked SEC teams, one of which was a close loss to the team that just played in the SEC championship game. I don't understand why that team is being discredited for their performances because of them having 2 losses. I think it would have been a way, way more competitive and an interesting matchup. And honestly, Alabama has the best shot maybe out of any of these teams to beat Georgia.
Nobody's beating Georgia. Okay. And I hate and I know that we're gonna try to drum up some good controversy in the previews of what could happen and who could make some magic work. Did you see that fucking SEC championship game with LSU?
Okay,
Did
but
you
we
see that?
talked about that
was a
going into the game, though,
dismantling.
Sean.
That was a fire
game.
sale. That was a fire sale.
But we talked about how bad LSU was and how we didn't think that they were even deserving of being in the SEC championship game in the first place, and it was because of just the timing of everything.
I think Alabama would have looked a little bit similar to that.
No, come
Dude.
on. I don't know, because I've talked about endlessly of how Brian Kelly doesn't really prepare his teams for those big games. He's not there yet with this LSU team. I got faith that Nick shows up and prepares his guys to at least have a hard-fought battle with Georgia and get some punches in.
They're not built that way this year. They're not. They don't have a game breaker. Aside from Jahmyr Gibbs and Bryce Young, we could say he's a game breaker, but what he needs somebody to help him break the game. He doesn't have it. He doesn't. He doesn't have the receiving options that we typically see in Alabama. And I understand it's cyclical. They used to be wide receiver university. Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Waddle, Ruggs, Judy, all of these dudes that came through there. All of them, understood, used to be wide receiver U. They're not. For some reason, the wide receivers are going other places. They need to lock in on that in the offseason and then recruit. And then maybe next year they have some receivers and they can get it going again. They don't have enough offensive firepower. They might have the next Alvin Kamara and Jahmyr Gibbs. I know that's a very popular comparison that I've seen on the internet, but it is not a good enough team for them to really push Georgia. It's not.
By the way, anyone who's joining in, make sure you hit that like button. Drop a comment as well for everyone who's participating in the conversation here. I understand the issues that they have at receiver, but look at what a much stronger receiving group for LSU did. The results that they produced against Georgia, nothing. They didn't do zip. They got all their yards in garbage time.
I wouldn't even call that much stronger. It doesn't matter. Georgia picked them apart. Georgia, I don't know how many tight ends they have. They have too many, and they're all too good. There's no stopping this team.
Let me ask you this, and we've got Fresh in the chat already calling his shots against Georgia. I love the confidence.
It's a ludicrous statement. I love Fresh. It's a ludicrous statement.
The question is not, because I think we both agree, not if Ohio State can beat Georgia. The question is rather, how competitive is this game? Do we think that Ohio State can at least inflict a little fear in Georgia?
I think they could. I think that the current wide receiver in Ohio State could possibly get Georgia on their heels a little bit. A lot of weapons there. A lot of weapons. We'll see if is Travion Henderson, is he out, hurt? His status, I think it was questionable in the Michigan game. They have a couple really good running backs. They have a quarterback that's good enough. Again, not high on Stroud. That's my opinion. He's a good college quarterback, but that's about what it is in my eyes. But they have enough to give them a half. And if they can dig deep, maybe they can give them 3/4. I don't see it, but dude, they kicked the shit out of Michigan last year. They kicked the piss out of Michigan.
Yes.
So I think they're kicking the piss out of anybody that they play in the first round. I do.
I think that what we saw from Michigan and Ohio State was like really telling that this is not going to be a very good matchup for Ohio State. And it's simply the one takeaway I had after the game is Ohio State's offense looked really soft, and they're going up against the most physical team in the country. So like, I don't have faith that they can nut up and face off with this Georgia defensive line. If anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Michigan. But I really don't
That's a good
believe
point.
Ohio State can step up to this occasion, to this momentous task. Like, I'm sure that they're going to have a bunch of big plays, and if Smith and Jigba's back, they're going to have some really, some fun splash plays. They'll probably score a couple long touchdowns, but there's going to be drives where CJ Stroud is going to be pissing down his leg with Jalen Carter draped all over him, like we had with Jane Daniels last night. But I think that Michigan,
Scheme it up if you're going against.
I don't know how much you can scheme up against.
I'm familiar. I'm very familiar. He's an impressive gentleman.
Impressive gentleman. That's what
I'm going to call him. He's an impressive gentleman.
I think that's the best way to describe the best defensive lineman in the country is
someone who instills fear in the heart of everybody that he has to face. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
I actually like that idea that, and we off air should brainstorm a way to use that. We should have like an impressive gentleman power rankings or something like that. It's just such a dumb way to phrase it, but I love it. I feel though that Michigan is the most equipped to face off with Georgia. Like, I feel that out of any team, if they don't dick around the way that they dicked around against Purdue, like that, you could see that they were kind of like, oh, we're ready to go play in the playoff in the beginning of that game, up until halftime. And then halftime rolls around and the commentators were all talking about like, this might be the best second half team in the country, which is really true. And then Donovan Edwards just starts grinding it out and then popping off all those long runs. And he has a huge game. Once they kind of set the tone in the second half, they were back to the Michigan team that we knew. The way that they set the tone is at the line of scrimmage. And their offensive line, I think, is the best in the country, if not second best to Georgia. That is what is going to help them win this game. I think that they're pissed off about last year too is going to invigorate them. I'm not saying that they beat Georgia, but if we're going to get a competitive game in the national championship game, I think that this is actually going to be more competitive than some people are willing to admit.
I agree. I can see that point. I'm going to throw the wrench in it. I have to. And it's the team, man. It's the team of Magic. I might put some faith in the team of Magic to make it competitive. You don't have a season like this just to get blown out in the college football playoff. I have to maybe say the team of Magic could get something going against Michigan. And then if they can, maybe they get something going against Georgia. I'm just brainstorming. I like the Magic team. Here's the problem. Max Duggan got the shit kicked out of him last game. He got annihilated last game. And people are like, oh, he's good. He's going to take worse hits versus the SEC teams. Maybe, but you can't take more hits than he took on Saturday versus the SEC teams. It seems almost impossible, especially on those last couple drives. He was getting obliterated.
Listen,
I know. Shut up.
Go ahead. Continue.
Shut up. We can ride with the Magic. We can ride with the fucking Magic for a little bit, can't we? I understand. I'm not trying to pipe dream it. I'm not trying to Cincinnati it. I'm saying they got some players. They fight and they play hard, and you could never count them out.
I love TCU, and they have been a really fun storyline. But reality started to set in for me in this Kansas State game.
Oh, no.
They got going
Kansas
way
State's
too late.
A good team.
They're a good team, but they're not playing in the playoff. Like, they're supposed to be a better team than Kansas State, and I wholeheartedly believe that they are. But here's where it comes down to it, why I don't think that they're going to stand. They're not going to be able to beat Michigan. I'm not saying that they're going to get dominated. They're going to fight until the end. I have a lot of faith that they will fight until the end, and they will find a way to crawl back into it if they do go down by multiple scores, like we saw happen against every fucking good opponent that they've played. But they are just not built well enough up front, especially on their offensive line, to go against Michigan.